Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1032 just came out, and we have a lot to talk about. We've got to talk about Apu and X Drake versus CP0, what's going to happen with the yokai situation, Zoro versus King, and Hiyori and Orochi. So let's just take it from the top, because right off the bat, I think we all got a bit of a twist with the reveal that Brook and Robin, well specifically Brook, is not going to be fighting CP0, rather CP0 is going to be fighting against X Drake and Apu. And you know, that does make a little more sense, I think, at least to me, just because Oda usually, the way that he sets up the Straw Hat fights in One Piece in general, he kind of lines them all up first and then goes down the row, sort of a domino effect, usually leading to a sort of trend of the most important Straw Hat fights being saved for last. So it would be a little odd, a little out of the ordinary for Brook to get his matchup started when all of those other Straw Hats have pretty much finished their matchup and we're like halfway through Zoro versus King, Sanji versus Queen, and then right at the tail end, Oda is stuffing in Brook versus CP0. So I think that that was a bit of a strange setup. I also think that it makes a lot more sense just, you know, with the hype that CP0 has behind them, to think that they might be saved for, you know, some of the supernovas, X Drake or Apu, because they might, you know, it was hard to tell because we hadn't really seen them fight, but it does kind of just make sense that they might just be, you know, one weight class above Brook, you know what I mean? So I think that the idea of Brook maybe instead helping Yamato against the yokai makes a little more sense, at least to me, simply because, you know, Yamato is obviously off to deal with the yokai situation. It appears like Brook and Robin may be following in her footsteps, and the yokai is made out of fire. Yamato and Brook both have ice abilities, right? I think that they would be the most well-suited to stopping the yokai. Previously, I thought Yamato would be perfectly fine stopping it on her own, but if this is a way to incorporate Brook and kind of get Brook something, then I think that it's very possible that Oda has Brook join in and they sort of do something combined ice-wise to deal with the yokai. The yokai, by the way, crazy effective. Who knew that Kanjuro could do something like this? Because obviously we understood that Kanjuro had a much more versatile ability, right, than we'd previously seen from him, you know, throughout most of the post-time skip. Once we realized that he could actually draw, he could make duplicates, he could make armies to fight for him. But to think that he could actually just create something like this, which seems very difficult to deal with, even for, you know, characters like Robin, like Brook, maybe even the CP0, I think I did not realize that was in his range of ability, because if he can create something like this, maybe it's possible that he can only create it because it was his final painting. He kind of put his life force into it or something along those lines. But I would be interested to see, you know, if Kanjuro is not actually dead, which in One Piece is an extremely high possibility. If Kanjuro is not actually dead, what he could do if we actually got to see him go all out in combat against somebody else and really just go wild drawing stuff like this yokai. So I think that the yokai situation, interesting. I have my thoughts on Brook in general and the fact that Brook did not end up getting this matchup, because there is a lot more to be said on that and kind of how Brook is treated in general in the story of One Piece. I think I'm going to save that for a video for next week. But beyond that, we have the Fuga-Yamato connection that I think needs to be acknowledged. I don't think it's a surprise. I think most people at this point are somewhat on board with the theory that those three numbers, the first three numbers, are in fact the three samurai that Yamato first met, and Yamato's friendliness with Fuga, who was the samurai who gave her the food, right? That kind of just, Shumatsuki Ushimaru, that kind of just seems to fit. They do have that connection. I think we might get that reveal in a short amount of time, or a bit of confirmation. Now, beyond that, Apu is becoming, I'm not going to say I like Apu, but I definitely find him entertaining. All right, I'm definitely not gonna say I like Apu, but he is getting to be more entertaining. I like the fact that he is, you know, just very quick to change his mind about who he's interested in allying with. I don't think he pulled the smartest move with telling CP0 that he is going to potentially sell these photos on the black market or to Morgans or whatever, to their faces while he's taking photos of them, but he's also clearly capable of handling himself. I actually really like the little Apu and X Drake back and forth of like, like, I thought they got you. He's like, I've armament hockey, dumbass. Like, don't underestimate me. And just their little exchange before they both basically land on, all right, we're teaming up against these guys. I like how Oda did the Apu X Drake situation, just because I was wondering, the previous chapter, okay, why even write this little storyline of Apu trying to get X Drake to team with him if that's immediately going to fizzle out and that doesn't lead to anything. But it was more like Oda kind of started off with them fighting, then had Apu introduce the idea of a collaboration, then X Drake rejecting it because that seems more in line with his character, and then Oda introducing an outside force, a third party, in this case CP0, that would push them into that alliance regardless. I think that's a good way to do it. It feels more organic, better than just Apu just saying, hey, you want to team up, and X Drake saying, yeah, sure, you know what, let's do it. Now, CP0 does know about Sword, it seems, because they said, we know about your true identity. So either it means, obviously the other option is just that they know that he's still working for the Marines, but even if they did know that, that would mean that they know about Sword, correct? So I think that the fact that CP0 knows about Sword, that's pretty exciting, because it just shows, not just knows about Sword, but knows which members of Sword are members of Sword. I think that's pretty exciting, because it sets up really well for a potential, like internal world government Marines conflict down the line, which is just something really juicy that I did not think that we would get in One Piece. Obviously, with the introduction to Sword, that's become more and more possible, but I think that more and more pieces are falling into place that seem to indicate something like that potentially happening in the future. Now, Zoro versus King. So, I think that this is kind of what I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm thinking of King's first. I was about to hype up the fight, and then I remembered King's first move, which was him pulling back his. I would never have expected King to pull back his head like that and launch it. Let me get to that in a moment. I like the fact, first of all, that King versus Zoro feels like people are like, power scaling doesn't matter, power scaling doesn't matter. Look, I don't even understand what that means. Power scaling obviously does matter. That's where we get the sense that, oh, this is going to be a more significant obstacle than previously. That's what makes Zoro versus King more exciting than Zoro versus Pika, right? So I don't understand why people are kind of like, no, Zoro should just be able to handle King, and, there's nothing strange about that. No, it's good to see that Zoro is struggling against King the same way that Luffy struggled against Katakuri, right? That feels more right, more in line, more consistent with what we have seen in the series previously, right? We would expect Zoro to not just be having an easy time against a first commander, especially because I think, especially when Zoro and King were fighting inside the dome, initially when Zoro showed up to help Sanji, we did get a couple chapters where it looked like it wasn't that hard for Zoro to fight against King, and they seemed to be pretty much evenly matched. But then in the last few chapters, it has kind of turned around, and King has gotten serious, started flexing more of his abilities, and now it just seems like Zoro's just as outmatched against King as Luffy was against Katakuri, and that's really, really good to see. So, King in general, his arsenal of... I like the way that Oda's writing this fight with Zoro versus King so far, because we start off with a bit of comedy, right? So King also playing into that gag, same gag that Queen had of doing something that makes no sense for a dinosaur to do. Arguably it started with Sasaki, right? But just this running gag of like, you see, this is what dinosaurs are capable of. This is how pterodons hunted in the past, which Zoro's kind of just like, oh yeah, okay, that's it. Although later on, I like the gag of like Zoro asking like, and the flames, is that what dinosaurs can do too? And King's just like, no, as if obviously that's not something dinosaurs can do, but yeah, launching your head 50 meters, that makes total sense. But it's interesting that King started off with essentially a Luffy-like attack, just pulling the head back and launching it. That's, classic Luffy. That's a classic Luffy move. Also interesting that Zoro had trouble blocking it. He says, I can't block that attack, so, if you want to imagine how Zoro versus Luffy could go, I think I'm going to start a fire with that. But in general, all right, the things I liked about the Zoro versus King fight, I like the fact that, so throughout the time skip, we've gotten bits and pieces of Zoro's strongest moves. He used against King just now his Twister and his 1080-pound Phoenix. Sorry, was it 360? Shoot, sorry. 1080 or 360, I gotta check the chapter again. My bad, guys, I just read it. But you know what I'm talking about, right? He's using his Twister, he's using his Phoenix attacks, and these are moves that have been basically super effective throughout the time skip. That same twister that he used against King, that was cutting up Kaido on the roof, right? His Phoenix Cannon attacks, they've been cutting up Pika, for example. They even just starting with something really basic with like destroying that giant fish on the way up to the New World when they're traveling from Fishman Island. Overall, like, Zoro's using his best long-ranged moves, and throughout the time skip, these have been the moves that, Zoro's never really faced a difficulty or really faced a challenge or faced an opponent that he couldn't easily dispatch with his standard moveset. Now, King, for the first time, he's in a one-on-one situation where with a dude who he has an answer for everything. So I think, first of all, just the mobility of King seems to be particularly difficult for Zoro. I don't know how many, flying moves, like how many long-range moves Zoro can actually pull out of the bag against this guy, because he's used what he normally uses, and King is either able to either dodge or just put up his wings as essentially like a cocoon around him, which I really like seeing, and just just block the whole thing. So I don't know. I like the fact that Oda's getting a lot of versatility out of just the Pterodon moveset. I think I've talked about this earlier, but I was a little disappointed all the way back when it was revealed that King was a Pterodon, simply because I had been hoping for a mythical zone. But now I see, everything that you can get out of it and why it's such a good fight for a swordsman, because obviously the speed, the mobility, but being able to use your wings as shields. Previous chapters being able to use the wings as swords themselves to launch, long-ranged flying slash attacks. Everything, I think, fits really well with the idea of like a Pterodon being a giant flying blade that can also double as, a shield for oneself. So a very difficult matchup for Zoro. And I like that, just to flex, King transforms back into a human, even though he doesn't need to whatsoever, and just fights Zoro one, close range melee combat sword to sword and still beats him. So overall, King, very impressive. I know that he, we've been waiting for some time for King to finally show what he could do. And I think that he's definitely, showing up and impressing. I think that at the very least, I'm a little confused by Zoro's conclusion that, okay, what type of person, like what type of race is he? Is he a giant? Is he a fishman? If I don't figure it out, I can't win. Like, is that the issue? Is the issue that you don't, like, what are you going to do? You're going to find out he's a Lunarian, and then that's going to be the key to victory? I don't know. I don't know if that's the main issue, but I think the main issue is you just can't hit the dude, and he's too strong and too fast and too good at swordsmanship. He hasn't even used his fire abilities yet, so I have no idea what Zoro's thinking. What's going to be the magic aha moment of being like, oh, you're a Lunarian. You're a fire god race that lived on top of the red line. I've solved it. Now I can just beat you. I have no idea where Zoro came up with that. How about Zoro figures out, how to unlock Ashura again? I think that's the key to victory here. So, Zoro's situation notwithstanding, well, I guess this connects. I was about to talk about Hiyori and Orochi, but Shamisen starts playing. Sorry if I pronounced Shamisen wrong. I'm American. Shamisen starts playing. I couldn't tell if this was was it simultaneous that Enma started acting up when the Shamisen started playing? I mean, it obviously was simultaneous, but I'm saying, is it cause effect, or is it just that Zoro is a little out of it? So maybe, low on energy, Enma starts drawing up his haki again, and that just happens to be when he's losing focus because of the Shamisen. Essentially, I'm saying, like, is it just a timing mix-up, like, or timing coincidence that Zoro, as he's kind of losing focus, listening to the Shamisen, he's kind of weakened by King. That's when Enma starts drawing more of his haki because he's kind of losing control. Or is the Shamisen literally causing Enma to react in some way? After all, this is Enma's original owner's daughter, her music reaching its ears, right? Its ears. I'll just say this. At one point I talked about, like, how Enma feels kind of like, this was way earlier, back when, the rooftop fights were going on, and it was like, Zoro's launching an attack at Kaido, and Big Mom and Kaido are talking about how the haki from that sword, that special sword, it's such an important sword, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about Enma, because it feels like Zoro kind of picked up a magic sword, and people really got mad. They're like, Enma's not a magic sword. Let me just say this. If Enma did actually just start acting up because of the Shamisen music, how the fuck is it not a magic sword? What kind of a sword listens to music? Is that like a normal sword? How is that not a magic sword? By every definition, that's a magic sword. If a sword listen, what kind of steel have you ever, what kind of normal steel sword have you ever seen that listens to music? I don't know, that recognizes the daughter of its owner. By all definition, if that's what happened, Enma's a magic sword. That's all I gotta say. Now, Zoro, he'll be fine. Hopefully, I think the final chapters, right? We got, in terms of matchups, we got the CP0 matchup. We got the Kid-in-Law, Sanji Queen, Zoro King. I think no matter what, the penultimate fight, so the fight before Luffy versus Kaido, will be either Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom or Zoro versus King, right? I think no matter what Sanji happens before Zoro's fight, it remains to be seen whether Oda places Big Mom's defeat last or, let's say, King's defeat last. I would think Big Mom's defeat last. So, you know, if that's the way Oda's going to do it, then we're probably looking at something like Sanji versus Queen, then Zoro versus King, then Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom, with Apu and X-Drake versus CP0 mixed in there somewhere. Maybe before the Big Mom fight, just to get to the others, just to finish off the Straw Hats, then get to the Supernovas. I don't know. But last thing is, it looks like Hiyori is going to kill Orochi. I say kill Orochi because we know how Oda does deaths, and we know that Orochi in particular really is resistant to dying, right? You threw all the scabbards at him, you had Kaido cut off his head. Orochi doesn't really die like that. So I think we're set up for a nice situation where Hiyori is going to probably, you know, take a shot at killing Orochi, surprise him, shock him, whatever. I just don't know. Is this the end for Orochi? It would be more fitting, right? Hiyori does it. She expressed this desire, this motivation all the way back in Act 2. That was her closing point of Act 2. But it's just hard for me to imagine, you know, like his devil fruit makes it so that he, of all characters, can go through fake deaths, like death fake outs over and over again without it actually meaning something. So to me, it's just like, okay, is this round 3? Is this the third time around? Maybe it's the third time's the charm. So Hiyori is the one who can actually finish him off because maybe she knows a little bit more about his devil fruit, or she's observed it, and so she goes for the heart or something like that, right? I think that'd be good. Good to see that she showed up. I think we all expected it was either Toki or Hiyori, and I think Hiyori is obviously more fitting, at least for the moment, just because, you know, you want to see the character that we've been following throughout Act 2 playing a role in the battle, right? So beyond all that, I think next chapter, hopefully we get to see Hiyori versus Orochi. I don't know if it's going to be a fight exactly, so versus. And hopefully we kind of get things set up for whatever final things other characters need to do. So Yamato and Brook versus the yokai, maybe something like that, whatever Denjiro is up to. Maybe we get closer to Momonosuke stopping Onigashima. But that's all for this video, and if you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you all next week.